everybody, and welcome back to Art Appreciation. This is Module 7, and this is our second part. So if you haven't watched the first part, go back and watch it. If you have, then congrats. This is your last video of the semester. Well, other than the final project walkthrough, if you haven't already watched it. So let's get right into it. We're going to start by talking about Fauvism. Everything we're going to talk about is 20th century art, and like I said in the last part, all of the styles they're overlapping. Some art styles do end, so the Impressionists, we don't really have Impressionist painters anymore. They're all post-Impressionist. But we still have Neoclassicism happening. We just have styles building upon each other. And a lot of their ideas come out of new scientific discoveries with color theory and light theory. And we have light experimentation happening with photography, and we see that in painting as well. We have a lot of things going on that influences art. So first we're going to talk about Fauvism. So Fauvism is a style of painting introduced in Paris in the early 20th century. It's characterized by areas of bright, contrasting color and simplified shapes. So here we have Matisse's Woman with a Hat. Fauves used simplification and bright color in order to display an enthusiasm for life. It's meant to be playful. It's meant to be fun. In this painting, we can see how Matisse looked back to post-impressionist styles of Van Gogh and Gauguin. We see the use of bright colors and abstraction from both artists, and the use of heavy brush strokes from Van Gogh. This painting is a depiction of Matisse's wife, Amélie. Obviously, it's not a realistic or idealistic depiction of her. People are not green. We don't have a lot of specific detail to her either. It's more of sort of a playful rendering of her. Next we have Expressionism. Expressionism refers to individual and group styles originating in Europe in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. It's characterized by bold execution and free use of distortion and symbolic invented color. Expressionists wanted to express experience or emotion over objective depiction. So it was more about what you feel in a scene. So this is Kandinsky's composition 7. So Kandinsky would listen to music and then draw or paint something that was inspired by that. So he titled his works of art compositions after sort of music compositions. He wanted people to feel the art the way that people felt music. And again, we have this bright use of color. Next we have Cubism. Cubism was an art style developed in Paris by Picasso and Braque. Began in 1908, and it's based on the simultaneous presentation of multiple views, disintegration in geometric reconstructions of subjects, and flattened ambiguous pictorial space. So basically we have flat planes. We have real things that they looked at broke down into these flat planes. They're meant to be sort of distilled and broken down. So this is Pablo Picasso's Les Demoiselles d'Avignon. It dates from 1907. Picasso not only looked to the post-impressionists for inspiration, but also looked to art of the past and non-Western art. The faces of the figures were modeled after African masks. We can really see that in these two over here. We also see everything sort of abstracted. So we can tell that it's women. We can tell like there's maybe a pear, an apple, grapes, possibly a watermelon. So some kind of fruit. We see like planes of what would be drapery. everything's very broken down into these sort of flat planes. They're abstracted. You can tell that it's supposed to look like a real thing, but it just doesn't. We also see that with George Braque. This is his painting, The Portuguese. It dates from 1911, and it's also Cubism. Braque is the one that came up with a lot of the terminology for Cubism. So this work by Braque inspired many other Cubist works of art by other artists. So we see this in Marcel Duchamp's Nude Descending a Staircase that we've talked about before. I don't think I included in this. No, I don't. But again, broken down flat planes. This is not a great image, or like, it's very pixelated, so I apologize for that. But it's flat planes, typically squares or cubes. But we do see some like circle things in here. So now we're going to talk about a little bit about American art. Early modern art did not really take root in America until after the Armory Show of 1913. This was a display of different kinds of modern art being created in Europe. Many Americans had never viewed such works before. Number one, works like this were not being created in the U.S. They didn't know about it. They didn't have exposure to it. To get inspiration from the Impressionists. The Impressionists were mainly working in Europe. We didn't have the inspiration from the Impressionists to have post-Impressionism here. Number two, works like these had never been displayed in the U.S. This is a time before airplanes. So there's an entire ocean separating Europe from the United States. Anything that comes here has to come on a ship. So things like moisture, mostly moisture, are not good for paint and canvas. It damages things. And so, and just handling and shipping, being loaded and unloaded off a ship can damage things, the bumps and rattles. So it's expensive to ship things, but then even then they risk being damaged. And then number three, many of the American artists and middle class had never traveled to Europe, so they had never had access to such art before. The wealthy patrons often would travel back and forth, go on vacation. They could afford the seafare. The middle class couldn't. And even if they did, they usually went to stay. They didn't come back. They couldn't afford both trips. So the Armory Show of 1913 influenced many American artists. It's the first time that any kind of Impressionist or post-Impressionist art was being displayed in the U.S. So even if artists didn't get to see it themselves, they saw photographs of it in newspapers. They saw other artists' renditions of things. They saw prints, like woodblock prints or etchings, depicting some of the art shown, and they read descriptions about it. So Georgia O'Keeffe is one of the artists that comes out of the Armory Show, one of the American artists. Georgia O'Keeffe created intimate images of nature. Many of her images were so zoomed in on an object or scene that they appear abstract. She was influenced by the bright and flat use of color that we see in modern works of art by artists like Gauguin and Matisse. This painting is a super up-close scene of a jack-in-the-pulpit flower. Frank Lloyd Wright is another American artist that was influenced by the Armory Show. He took inspiration from the show in European art and applied it to architecture. We've talked about him in the past. We've talked about him when we talked about architecture. We've talked about him when we talked about in our Module 1 intro stuff. So we're not going to talk about him in this lecture, but he also was inspired by that. So Americans, it took a minute, but we got there. Next we're going to talk about Futurism. Futurism was a group movement originating in Italy in 1909. It celebrated both natural and mechanical motion and speed. This is Umberto Boccioni. It's unique forms of continuity in space. It dates from 1913. In this work, Boccioni creates a sense of motion, even with a still figure. We see tendrils of the figure pulling behind as the figure steps forward. It's like muscle fibers or something are pulling off of him. We see a lot of sculpture by futurists, although they also do create paintings. So this is Marcel Duchamp, Nude Descending a Staircase. It was inspired by Braque, but it is technically futurist. We have that movement. So we kind of bring Cubism in, but we have that movement forward that's typical of futurism. Next, we're going to talk about Dada. Dada ridiculed contemporary culture and conventional art. Some called Dada nonsense art. Dada artists produced images, literature, and movies. And one of the most famous Dada artists is Marcel Duchamp. We just talked about him. He also painted in futurism. He really practices a wide range of modern art. This is Duchamp's fountain. This is the replica. The original was destroyed. Sir Marcel Duchamp was known for his ready-mades. He took everyday objects and manipulated them slightly to push the boundaries of what is art. In this example, he took a urinal, turned it upside down, and titled it Fountain. It was meant to be exhibited in an exhibition in Paris by the Society of Independent Artists that Duchamp himself helped form. This work was rejected by the curator and is said to have angered him so badly that he took it outside and destroyed it. And that's why the replica is all that exists today. Duchamp submitted this under the name R. Mutt. He didn't put his own name on it because he was already a known artist. People would have accepted it as art if it had Marcel Duchamp on it, but having a no-name artist on it made it egregious. So again, questioning, pushing the boundaries of what is art, what makes it art. Is it who makes it? Is it what it is? Does it have to be in some kind of style? So that's kind of what Dada did. Man Ray is another artist who created Dada works of art. We talked about Man Ray when we talked about photography. So this rheograph or photogram by Man Ray was made by laying body parts over a paper in different times. So different parts were exposed for different amounts of times. And this creates this layered effect. So the Dada style was meant for experimentation and creation while pushing the boundaries of what is art. So is art a photograph? Is art using photo paper for a different scene? Is art something that's already been made, but we just change it a little bit? Dada worked under a manifesto. They actually had written manifesto for Dada. But Dada ended after a fight broke out at a meeting of Dada artists. Reporters recorded people being arrested after the fight, saying Dada is dead. And when I say a fight, I mean they had a fist fight in a theater. So Dada is dead. People may try to practice Dada art, but it's really like a neo-Dada. Because the original Dada is dead. Next one is Surrealism, which is my personal favorite. Surrealism was meant to reveal the unconscious mind. Images were often abstract and sometimes non-representational. Surrealist painters would sometimes put themselves into trance-like states using medication and other methods in order to create scenes in their mind as inspiration for their works. So this is Salvador Dali's The Persistence of Memory. It dates from 1931. Dali uses abstraction to present a dreamlike scene that represents the decay of time. So again, it looks real. Elements look real. This looks like a melted clock. This landscape could be a real landscape. But then we have this weird abstracted face, and then we have things that don't quite make sense, like ants eating a honey stopwatch. um, so it's surrealism. It feels real, but it's not real. We also have Rene Magritte. This is The Son of Man. It's 1964. This is one of the most popular surrealist images. It's meant to be a self-portrait of the artist. In it, we see an apple covering the face and the arms of the figure being two different directions. So we have an elbow here. So this arm's facing forwards. This one's backwards. His face is covered by an apple, but it's meant to be a self-portrait. The longer you look at this painting, the weirder it gets. So, like, we have a button that's unbuttoned. It's just weird things happening. Its painting is simple and playful, but it does have like this haunting quality. So again, surrealism. Next we have constructivism. Constructivism emphasized abstract art, modern materials, and useful arts. So this is the Workers' Club. It was designed by Rodchenko. Constructivist art focused on useful art, such as furniture. Artists worked to use modern materials and design to create functional art that was meant to be used. So we have chairs, we have desks. It's designed to look well, but it's also designed to be functional. So constructivism, think about they're constructing something to be used. We do have constructivist painting. They were always abstract. They tend to use these flat planes of colors, and they were somewhat inspired by the Cubists, but they often were actually more non-representational. They didn't necessarily look to any real thing. This is Popova's Painterly Art Tectonic. And again, we're talking about all of these things happening at the same time. This one dates from 1917. This one's 1925, but then we just looked at 1964. So all of these things are sort of overlapping and interacting with each other. So now we have dish still. We've talked about dish still just briefly before when we talked about the abstraction of a cow. So this is Theo van Doesburg. And dish still was a purist Dutch art movement that's aimed at creating a universal language of form that would be independent of individual emotion. Form was pared down or distilled to primary hues and rectangular shapes. So it's all about looking at a real thing, distilling it down into shapes and colors to take the emotion out of it. So we've talked about this one before, abstraction of a cow. So we have the sketch of a cow. We have it broken down into shapes. We have it broken down further into shapes and added color. And then finally broken down into this form. So when our final image is the cow. One of the most famous dish still painters is Piet Mondrian. This is composition B, number 2. So again, we see that use of composition instead of a title describing what you see. So now we're going to talk about international style architecture. There are several different styles of architecture going on at the same time. And we did talk about this when we talked about architecture. But this one's very important. So this is, this example is the Seagram building. It was created in 1958. It was designed by Ludwig Mies van der Rohe and Philip Johnson. It's located in New York. The international style avoided decoration and focused on sleek, functional design. The international style used modern materials such as concrete, steel, and glass. Remember, when we talked about the Romans, we talked about concrete. We lost concrete. We did not have the recipe for it for a while. And then we created a new recipe for it. So we have those materials, and that allows us to build up instead of building out. So this is an example of that international style. It's very sleek. We don't have a lot of decoration. It's mostly a frame with glass. And it's more about the shape. So less is more, and form ever follows function. So in architecture, we sort of pare things down. We see that sort of distilling and paring down of things. We see decoration still happening. We see a lot of color, but we break things down from their, I don't know, bigger states. Next, we're going to talk about abstract expressionism. So, abstract expressionism originated in the US in the 1940s. Artists in this style worked to emphasize spontaneous personal expression using different styles of art. Jackson Pollock's paintings are examples of this. Artists working with this style cared more about expression than form and content. Their works were meant to express the emotions of the artist and evoke emotions in the viewer. A lot of the works are more about the creative process than the creation itself. So this is Convergence. It was created in 1952 by Jackson Pollock. So this is rather large, and it's splatter painted. But again, it's more about the process of splatter painting. It's sort of the chaos that comes after than about the actual product. Sort of on the opposite end of that spectrum is color field painting. So this is Mark Rothko's Orange and Tan, painted in 1954. Color field painting was inspired by abstract expressionism, but instead of being about the process of creating art, color field paintings were more about evoking an emotion in the viewer, using flat planes of color. So again, we have these ideas of color theory. We're playing into that. We're playing into how color theory in psychology. So how do different colors make the viewer feel? What kind of emotions can we invoke just by using a color? These paintings were often looked at by people, and comments were said along the lines of, my child could paint that, or anybody could paint that. One of the things that my photo professor used to say to us is, anybody could make it, but they didn't. That person did. So, and it did have a purpose. It wasn't just meant to be a color on a canvas. This isn't just a gold and orange canvas. It's about what emotions can we evoke using these colors. And even the brush strokes, that's purposeful that we still see those brush strokes. Next, we have assemblage. We've talked about assemblage before. We talked about sculpture, but now we're going to sort of talk about it in context of this time period of modern art. So, assemblages are sculptures that are created using cast-off objects or objects in a way that were not their original function. So this is Edward Kleinholtz's John Doe. It was created in 1959. It was made to be a social statement about the average American and the blandness of middle-class life. But even then, this wasn't really made in periods of time prior to this. We didn't have the kind of trash that we do, or that we did in the 50s and that we do today. We have even more today. But sort of those cast-off items, things like plastic. Plastic had not been used until the 20th century. So those kind of things allowed for us to have the access to make assemblages. We also see a rise in events and happenings. Happenings were usually rehearsed events conceived by artists that sometimes included the viewer. So these are not the same as like a theater production or a play. Again, these all often root back to psychology and human nature. They're almost experiments. So this is photographs from an event called Household by Alan Caprow. At this happening, the artist gave participants parts. So the men were told to build a tower, while the women were told to construct a nest, each on a trash pile. During the events of the happening, the men destroyed the nest, and the women retaliated by pulling down the tower. By participating, each person gained a new perspective on the theater of life in their time. There were no viewers at this event. It was more about the experience of the participants, although it was documented by the artist. So it's sort of an example of human nature of you take down what somebody else builds. Performance art were dramatic presentations by an artist in front of an audience. So this is a still from The Artist is Present. It dates from 2009. And it's by the artist Marina Abramovic. Today, performance art is more of an endurance art, but it's been in many forms. This event took place over 3 days and began when the museum opened and ended when it closed each day. Participants could go and sit across from the artist as long as they wanted to. The artist did not speak, she only sat there and stared at the viewer for the duration of the event. Even in 2009, we're seeing a rise of cell phones. We saw the beginnings of disengagement between people. So part of this was an attempt to bring people back to reality, to make eye contact. It was about people having a moment to not be alone, to be just present with another person without any distractions. And so she sat all day and made eye contact with people. Next, we're going to talk about pop art. Pop art used mass production techniques such as silkscreen or real objects. These were in works that were generally more polished and ironic than assemblages, though. So these works of art were often meant to make a social commentary on mass media and mass production. One of our main pop artists was Andy Warhol. This is his Campbell soup cans. It dates from 1962. His works very often made commentary about the mass production and consumption of images. His works are meant to make the viewer contemplate the artistry in everyday objects and how the consumer is manipulated to like certain items over others. So, we see Campbell soup cans. We see them on a shelf all the time. But when you put it in a frame and you put it on a wall, you actually look at the fonts. You look at the design of the can. You look at things like that in a different light. And you realize just how much we take in. Next, we're going to talk about minimalism. Minimalism is a non-representational style of art that usually is very restrictive and often only consists of simple geometric shapes or masses in solid color. This is Robert Morris's Untitled, dates from 1965, and it is just mirror-covered glass cubes. It's very sleek, very clean, but it doesn't serve a function. It's just meant to be, a lot of minimalist art is very empty. It's very still. It's very quiet. It's not loud or bright. It's almost calm, but almost in an eerie kind of way. We do see minimalism make its way into architecture and interior design. It does take a little bit more, it has a little bit more character in that space. But it's still not very individualistic. It's still very simple and clean. Next, we have conceptual art. So with conceptual art, the idea and process take precedence over the tangible product. So this is 1 in 3 chairs by Joseph Kosuth. So this work of art displays all of the ways of representing a chair, but only one of the things is actually a real chair. So we have a definition, a written definition of chair. We have an actual chair, and we have an image of chair. So all of these are chair without actually being chair. So that's conceptual art. It's kind of like questioning things like that. Another famous conceptual art piece is called This Is Not a Pipe, and it's a painting of a pipe, because it's not a pipe, it's a painting of a pipe, but we would say that's a pipe. Next we have site-specific and earthworks. Site-specific works of art can only be exhibited in their intended environment. They can't be moved. They're either taken down or they stay up. They're designed specifically for their environment. Earthworks are always site-specific, but site-specific works are not always earthworks. Earthworks are works of art made using the earth. Basically, they're man-made natural formations. They're not always meant to last, meaning they're ephemeral. So an example of that is Spiral Jetty. This dates from 1970. It was made by Robert Smithson. And he used different equipment, bulldozers, shovels, tractors, to move dirt to create this spiral. At different times, it's underwater and cannot be viewed. The first time the water ever covered it, people were not sure if it would remain once the water levels receded, and it surprisingly did. Even the artist is not sure how long it will last, and especially with consistently changing water levels. So if you've ever been around any body of water, you know that water rises and falls depending on different seasons, depending on different times of day, whether it be a lake, ocean, river. If it rains more, the water level's going to go up. If you have a dry spell, it's going to go down. When this was first created, a lot of people wanted to go in and put a barrier around to protect it from the water rising, and the artist shut that down. He was like, no, this is meant to exist in the natural environment. It's meant to become a part of nature. If nature destroys it, then that's okay. So that is it for our Module 7 lecture. That's it for this semester of lectures. If you have any questions about anything between now and your final, send me an email, ask me questions. I can meet with you. Be happy to help you. I don't think these are actually your lecture notes questions for this one. Check your assignment for the lecture notes questions. It might be. I don't remember. But it's been a good semester. I hope you all enjoyed this class. If you didn't, I'm so sorry. I'm working on. We redid the class this semester, so we're working on making it better. It just takes time. But I wish you all the best in the future, and thanks for taking this class.